You are live. Give it a second to catch on. Oh, according to this, we've been live for 13 seconds, 14, 15. Sure doesn't feel like it. It hasn't gone live on my phone yet, so I'm waiting to see. But everybody's going to hear this anyway, aren't they?
Yep.
Well, then let's just dive right in. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Chaps Chatting Champs. Good morning, Brant.
Good morning, Josh.
And good morning, everybody, and especially good morning to everybody joining us live. Assuming we are live, it still hasn't popped up on my phone. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. We're live. Hooray. So, yes, we decided to do this episode live just because I literally had zero time to record and edit a video ahead of time. So, this was just the easiest way to get one out on Friday. We didn't want to miss 2 weeks in a row. So, hello, Black Dog. Happy Friday. So we're going to stick to the normal format mostly, but we certainly want to be interacting with the live chat. One thing about that is if you all have any this or that questions for us that you'd like to put in the chat, feel free to throw them in there. If you wouldn't mind, try to save them till closer to when we're going to hit that part. But if you throw them in early, I'll try to remember to hunt them out. That would be fun.
Yes, do my work for me, chat. Thank you.
Yeah, it's Brant's job to do this or that this week. So he had this great idea to let you guys do it for him. Hey, Corey, welcome to the chat. Who's the new guy,
Very
right?
good with
Yeah.
those ideas.
Brant looks so great. I love it with the lack of beard.
Oh,
It's the first
yeah,
time
I
I've seen
forgot.
you.
This is the first time I've had nothing.
Yeah, we didn't get to do it last week. I've been very busy with just family stuff and vacation and some other things going on. So, but happy to be back and hopefully making a lot of videos this weekend. Good morning, Chauncey Barton. And hey, Steve, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us. So like I said, we're going to stick to the normal format mostly. We're going to go a little bit longer since you all have taken the time to join us live and since we missed last week. And the topic I've chosen is not the topic you might expect, but we'll get to that in a second. But it's going to require a little bit more time to talk about. So Brant, did you know they released a rules update yesterday?
Oh, has anybody been talking about that?
I've seen a little bit here and there. And if I had known that they were going to do that, then certainly that's what I would have scheduled the stream to be about. But to be fair, it's a lot more to talk about than what we would be able to do in our normal format anyway. Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Guarismo. Thank you for welcoming me back. But we do want to talk briefly about sort of our impressions of the rules update. I'm going to do a deep dive later today talking about everything. And Steve's already done a great one over on his channel. And I imagine everybody else is going to be talking about it too. So
Nelson's is up as well.
did Nelson? Okay, yeah, he's already got his up. So yeah, if you have questions about it between all of us, hopefully all of your questions will be answered. But I'm really excited to talk about it because my first impression of it is that it's absolutely fantastic. Not only was I happy to see it, I am so impressed with how it's laid out.
Yeah, it feels like one of these updates that is like a useful tool more than a change to the game, right? It's like here's an actual rules reference, and everything that you're trying to reference is referenceable. I don't know if I use too much like jargon there, but it feels like if I want to find something, I can find it, and it's in that spot, and it's bulleted, and it's laid out, and it has examples. And that's nice. That's what you want a reference to be. You want it to be findable and answer your actual question, right?
Yes, that's the biggest thing. I've seen a little bit of negativity out there. They feel like they changed a ton of rules and this is so much to absorb. And I can see some of that, but we're going to talk about it when I make the video, but it's mostly clarifications more than rules changes. But the good thing about it is how well it's laid out. Everything is so step by step. Like if you look at how an attack works, a villain attacks, it goes through every tiny little step, including, when you can play responses, when you can play interrupts. They pretty much every single common question somebody asks, they made a little bullet point for it. So, as we kind of come to grips with some of the new targeting rules and things like that, the important thing to note about the reference itself is how easy it is to read. Like if you look something up, like what you were saying, it's an actual reference. If you look something up, you're probably going to have your question answered because I think they thought of just about everything when it comes to, I'm looking up what a hazard is. And not only does it explain how it works, he actually put in there, and it's only one total, not one per player, which is a common mistake people make with hazards. So even though that's not necessarily part of the rules of it's just a little reminder of a commonly asked question.
I think it's really useful, or I think it's really good that we have Tony on board. I think Tony's a very much rules guy. I've gotten a chance to play a couple games with him, and he's definitely the like, I think this is how that will work, and isn't this true elsewhere? So I think that's really good. I know he was on there. I'm certain Alex was working on it as well, and I'm sure there was some feedback from Caleb, but I think that's going to be a really helpful thing, is having somebody who's thinking from the rules perspective, which I admit I'm a rules person and I'm not a rules person in a co-op game. It's just not as big of a stickler for me. If this was a competitive card game, it would be such a bigger deal,
right?
Obviously for that competitive level, but you certainly want your questions answered, and I think it's great that they're there. We obviously still have a little bit of ambiguity
There's
with
a couple
few
things,
things that aren't permanent and whatnot, but at least we've got this idea of permanents are meant to be set aside. They don't go in our decks. This is when they come out, right? We have all those kind of things.
Yeah, that one's huge. The timing chart is so nice. There are so many little things that I've read through the whole thing, and I'm going to go through the whole thing again later. And there's just so many little things that you might not even have thought of. And there are a few minor changes to how the game works and stuff like that. So we're going to have to come to grips with a little bit of that. Just real quick, when I catch up with chat. Good afternoon, Mark Brook from the UK. Hello, Serious Rain. Eric Furston appreciates the summary of notable changes. That changes are highlighted in red and that permanent cards have been resolved. Yes, the permanent thing, that was probably the biggest thing that annoyed the heck out of people. Every time they come out with a new hero with a permanent card, it's like, well, it still doesn't work according to the rules. Well, they knew it would eventually. So we got to that. And Steve points out that's why it took so long, is because it's so thorough. Agreed. Hi, Canadian Mustache. Welcome. And Chauncey Barton asked, are you bummed about Go for Champions or Cosmo changes? I'm not. Go for Champions is a card I pretty much wasn't using anyway, because it's just a little silly. So sure. I'm actually more likely to use it now that I can only use it once. I think it'll be nice to have that choice of, do I use it this deck pass, or maybe save it in the deck for if I need it later. And the Cosmo thing, I don't know. The main thing he did with Cosmo is probably Doctor Strange, and maybe that brings him back down slightly. So I'm personally okay with it.
I think the Cosmo thing kind of became a necessity if you think about going forward, which is what they mentioned. So let's just say they want to change how a villain works, or how, like a win condition. Maybe a villain has a deck of cards and they're putting those cards out, and when they get them all in play, they win, or whatever. I don't know. I'm just coming up with a design thing. But suddenly, if they have a deck of cards that Cosmo can discard and they can't put those cards into play, right, and that deck doesn't recycle, now it's broken, so that system doesn't work. So I think that's probably more of why they did that for Cosmo, to open up and not limit their design space with future heroes and villains. So I think it was kind of a necessity from that front.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, there's so much, with a game like this that goes on and on and on. I know it can be a little frustrating if it feels like they're changing the rules all the time and stuff like that, but I think from a positive standpoint, we should try to look at it as, we're just so grateful that we have a company that cares enough about this game, that is constantly answering these questions online and going to the effort to make this new document. So, it's always a thing we're going to have to keep up with. Hi, Junie. Welcome to the stream. Serious Rain. It feels they should reprint the errata wrong cards. It would be nice. They don't ever do that. With these types of games, like they don't make like an errata pack. Maybe when they re-release the cards in the future, like if you buy the Star-Lord pack or whoever comes with Cosmo, like maybe he'll have the new text. I don't know if hopefully they'll do that. I know they did in Lord of the Rings.
So Josh, just remember, when you are talking about these people's comments, you can click on them.
Oh, that's right. Yes. So yeah, for example, with the changes now corrected on them, yes, that would be nice. I don't think we'll ever get like a separate pack, but maybe at least in the new versions. Not helpful if you already own the cards, but
yeah, maybe at conventions they'd put something out like that. But certainly, like when I was at the last convention, I got that Ironheart that somebody had made, so I could see the community making those and bring them to conventions or Con of Heroes, right, and then giving them out to people, which isn't the same if you can't get to those things, but at least it's a place to get them.
All right, we're going to go through this just a little bit more, and then we're going to jump into our main topic. Steve points out that Cosmo can still be huge with Gambit or Spider-Woman that can be up at the top deck. So yeah, probably more how he's intended to be used. Fun little combos instead of just a permanent, like he can always use his ability. I don't think he was ever intended to be that way. Canadian Mustache is still going to be playing the cards as printed. He's not going to refer to rule book anytime. Yeah, absolutely. You can't, it's difficult to expect to remember all these things. And most of them aren't even necessarily that big of a deal. And Eric also pointed out the same as Steve, how Cosmo can still be useful. And yeah, everybody's kind of talking about how great Wanda is and everything. And Gorismo is very happy with FFG right now. I am too. This was a long time coming. And as someone who keeps up with the Hall of Heroes updates pretty regularly, that's pretty much how this thing reads, is just the Hall of Heroes latest updates page, now in an actual easy to find rule book and alphabetized conveniently for us.
I also think FFG making this Star Wars Unlimited game that they announced, I promise we don't have to go down that whole road, but the fact that they're now going to have a competitive CCG on their hands and have to stay on top of things like that is probably going to benefit us in Marvel Champions, in that they're going to get a lot more used to having to stay on top of all that stuff. I know they haven't had a strong history of it. I get it, but I'm just saying, if they are turning over a new leaf, it will benefit us as LCG players as well.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move into our main topic, which I really wanted to talk about the core set villains. We talked about the core set heroes, and there are just new people coming into this game all the time, and they're always experiencing the core set villains. But I also want to talk about what it's like to go back and play them, because I'm of the opinion, and we'll come back to this maybe as the final point, and I don't think this is a controversial opinion by any means, but that the Marvel Champions core set is the best core set for any LCG ever. And I think the villains are the main reason why. So what I would like to do is go through each villain somewhat briefly, talk about kind of what they do, what makes them unique. Are they still interesting? Are they still unique? And then what the core set looks like as a whole in 2023.
Quick question. Are you talking LCGs from Fantasy Flight or anything like an Ashes?
Mainly just comparing Lord of the Rings, Arkham,
Okay.
and Marvel together. Yeah, it'd be
From
a little more specific. Real quick, just Canadian, the permanent setup of timing windows updates are awesome, though, because clarification on how the game should actually function is nice. Agreed. And Junie is asking me, are you still going to post Marvel United videos or special subscriber milestones? I am still planning on doing Marvel United. I've gotten behind on a lot of stuff. It's been a crazy time, but I definitely am still playing that. The subscriber milestones, I kind of cut off at 2,000 just because it was really, as much as I enjoy doing them, interfering with regular content, because you guys have been so nice to subscribe so quickly that there was always another one right around the corner, and I wasn't able to keep up anymore. But 2,500 is right around the corner, so
hey,
I might try to do something for that.
I tell you what I'm going to do. I know it's a little bit on your channel, but if I get to 1250, so I'm at Step Into the Portal, I'm just under 1200. When I get to 1250, I am going to play a live four-handed X-Men game.
Oh my goodness. Well, there you go.
All right. So you can come over and subscribe to Step Into the Portal. I know it's your channel, Josh. Thanks for giving me a second, but I'll at least do a milestone there. When I get to 1250, roughly half of yours, I will bring my cameras downstairs because I have a way bigger table, and I will do a live four-handed X-Men game.
That sounds absolutely awesome. So go subscribe to Step Into the Portal if you haven't already. And Canadian Mustache points out, I like LTR, LCG more overall, but the Champions core is definitely better. Okay, yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that. Steve thinks you should do a 12-hour stream. So jumping in, so first we have Rhino, and Rhino is sort of meant to be the tutorial scenario. And I've sort of said in the past how I feel about that. To some degree, I think it works really well as a tutorial because he's very simple. Rhino pretty much just attacks and heals. He gets tough and he attacks. That's kind of his whole deal. So he's easy to keep up with. The reason I don't love it as a tutorial scenario, and I'll be interested to hear what you think, Brant, because I always come at these things from a solo perspective. And I know you've played a lot of solo, but you play a lot of multiplayer too. So you have a better balanced opinion about these things. There's two things about him that I think don't work as well as a tutorial for solo. One, the fact that they kind of tie together. The fact that the main scheme only goes up to 7, making it very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to go to alter ego in solo, because, if he doesn't get an advance, you're probably fine as long as you've brought the main scheme down to 0. But if he does get an advance, you're in trouble. And it seems like that's a pretty small encounter deck. So advance isn't that unlikely. And the other thing, and then I'll let you talk, is the fact that he only has one main scheme, period. And I've seen people have questions. You play Rhino a whole bunch, and then you go to Claw, and they literally don't know what to do when his main scheme completes because they didn't learn what to do in Rhino, the tutorial scenario. So what do you think about him as a tutorial?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's generally fine. I do agree that maybe having 2 schemes would have been better for people to learn what that is. Obviously, they then added it in on Claw. They went 1, 2, 3. I know we're not there yet, but that kind of made sense. I do believe the tutorial scenario is intended to be Captain Marvel and Spider-Man versus
Okay,
Rhino. Is
that's true.
that the way
That's
how
true.
it's set up?
I think so
I
now that you
can't remember
mention
if
it.
they specifically tell you, like, when playing solo, use Spider-Man, or if you can use either. It feels like Spider-Man is the initial one.
Yes.
But I can't remember if it's also like two-handed, which I would never tell anybody to play two-handed for their first game of Marvel Champions. But if you're playing with another person, it makes perfect sense. My
Yeah.
first game was 3-player, and I guess I've never looked back when I played. Uh, I think he's fine because his mechanics are basic. I don't know. I mean, it's always weird. Do you want people to win that game and kind of win it easily? There is the funny thing if you start talking about the other ones, right? Like Flies and Spiders, is that the first one for Lord of the Rings?
Mm-hmm.
And like the massive difference between getting the Ungoliant and not.
Yeah.
Like it's way different when it
Yeah.
branches at the end in terms of difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Or if
so
it
you know,
shows
there's
up in the middle of the scenario
right,
randomly.
yeah. So there's always some strange things with how the first one is. I can't remember the first one in Arkham. I remember playing those 3. You're in
You're
your
kind of
house
locked
and
in
the
your room,
floor
yeah, and you
opens
get out
up
of the
or
house, you go to the
something.
attic, you go to the basement. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's pretty reasonable because it gets you doing a lot of traveling. Anyway, just trying to compare those.
Excuse me.
I don't really mind Rhino. I feel like what's nice is that we still have a playable villain after the tutorial. He's not
That
so simple that he's not playable, and modulars can make him really fun.
that was my next question. Yeah, talking about him currently, like, is he somebody that you still go back and like to play? I don't generally play him a lot. I played him somewhat recently on my channel, in expert with like a different modular. So if you make him harder, you add some things to him. Though the thing I noticed in that video that's really funny is if you keep getting his cards, his very basic side schemes, his very basic minions, you can put the hardest modular encounter set in there you want. But if you keep
Yeah.
pulling his cards, it's just super easy. And then, so the other thing, yeah, so he's pretty good as a tutorial, doesn't quite teach you everything, but gets you there, and you learn how to play the game, and you don't get absolutely stomped probably, but he can beat you. If he does, he's got more extra attacks than most villains. So he
Mhm.
can just
Right.
keep attacking you if the cards come up wrong, which could be a negative player experience. But like you said, do you want to win that first game? I've seen people post and say, like, I beat Rhino on my first try. Did I do something wrong? Is this game too easy? It's like, well,
Mhm.
it's the tutorial. It's not meant to be too hard. But yeah, compared to the Lord of the Rings and Arkham, and I definitely want to kind of keep that in a frame of reference since we're going to be talking about, is this the best one? I think all 3 of the tutorial scenarios are really good. I really enjoy Pass It Through Mirkwood. I've played it 1,000 times. That's one I will still go back to and play when I play Lord of the Rings, because it gives you just enough to do. But obviously you can absolutely smash it with newer
Yeah,
decks.
yeah.
But I think it still has a nice flow. And then the Arkham one does a good job of teaching you, though that one has kind of a wonky moment with the ghoul priest. If you don't read the whatever they're called, agendas, I think,
Mhm.
clearly the timing of that one can be, I've seen that one get messed up so many
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
So maybe not to have such a weird, and that one has such an unusual timing, because usually you do advance the agenda, not to make this about Arkham, but usually you do advance the agenda like at a certain time every time, and that's like one of the few scenarios that has an exception. It's like,
Right.
should you have put that in the very first
Yeah, yeah.
scenario? So it's just kind of funny how that works. But yeah, so quickly seeing what the chat has to say about Rhino. Well, Eric Ferson thinks four-handed solo is the only way to play. So I have yet to try that myself.
The only way.
Corey Levick says Rhino's okay, but he's my least favorite part of the core box. The single scheme and high attack bugs me. Yeah, I don't go back to him a lot for those reasons either. I love to go to Alter Ego a lot, and as D20 pointed out in here somewhere, like, it scared him from going to Alter Ego, and I think that lesson stuck pretty well for a lot of us solo players, to the point where you try to play a hero like Ms. Marvel not too long after the core set, and you're like, she's terrible because I have to go to Alter Ego and I don't want to.
He has a lot of 0 and 1 boosts though,
He
right?
really does.
So like I'm
I
trying to
think
think if the
those
main
I was just
sorry.
gonna say, I think no, it's okay. I think those times when you do get an advance and you lose, those just stick with you.
Yeah.
But most often it's probably fine.
Is it your own fault?
That's the
Like,
argument.
hold on, I'm just thinking if it's at 0, which I understand that it wouldn't be because you're not fully grasping clear the main scheme. It goes to
Mhm.
1, then he schemes for 1 plus
1
a
plus a
boost,
boost.
which would have to be a 2, and then he would have to draw an advance and scheme for 1 plus 2, right? So clearly it's when you're leaving that main scheme at 1, 2, or 3 and
Right.
flipping down.
Yeah.
So when I say it's your own fault, I'm obviously teasing people. But
Yeah.
like
That's a
it's getting you to
tutorial in and of
recognize how
itself.
important removing threat they consider removing threat in the game. Right.
Right. Right. Yeah. Maybe a little blurb in the rule book to mention that could be useful. But yeah, Steve
Mhm.
points out something similar to Scheme of One. He's very easy to stay down. Just I'm not going to read every comment, just kind of moving through them quickly. Yeah, it did scare me into going to Ultra Ego because the advanced drawn and AE felt so calm with other villains. It never seems as bad. Yeah. And again, it is a small encounter deck, so maybe it happens more often than not, or again, those things just stick with us. Corey Rolex Rhino now. Expert Claw is my go-to. Yeah. So moving on to Claw, then the second scenario in these boxes, I think is where all three of them really, really shine. And we'll certainly talk about Claw first. Now, I talked a lot about Rhino. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe go through quickly what makes Claw interesting and unique.
Yeah, so Claw is the one where we're going to see double boost. So suddenly you look and you're like, oh my gosh, this villain attacks for 0. This is going to be so much easier than Rhino. And then you see the double boost thing. So you've got to plan for what can I take. And then he's got a lot of cards that say, you're going to be exhausted if you take damage. But in addition, he's starting with setup. So he starts with the defense network out. So we get to see,
Crisis.
what Crisis does. And then he starts with a guard. No, sorry, he starts with a minion. So we see that idea of like pulling minions from the deck. I'm thinking about the toughness and the guard. We have to deal with those things. But suddenly there's stuff on the table, right? The villain is in the middle of their scheming, and you've got to come in as opposed to kind of cutting them off or heading them off before they've done anything. So that's where we see that. We also see 2 main schemes. So trying to learning. And of course, when you flip one, you're like, oh no, I'm going to get another minion. So how do I deal with all those things? So again, can I flip down? But I think over time, players start to learn like, hey, if I get one more minion, that's something I can deal with. Or as a table, if we're in multiplayer, one more minion is definitely not an issue. Yeah, I adore Claw. Like, I think he's just the quintessential control villain. And he says, you can't set up. You've got to dismantle what I'm setting up on the table first. Then you can start your setup against me. And while you're doing that, I'm going to try to keep you under control.
Yeah, I agree completely. He quick hello to Jester. Hey, good to see you. Thanks for joining the chat. Yeah, I think for me, Claw is the real tutorial scenario in that he teaches you how to play the game. Like Rhino teaches you how to play the game, the rules. But
Yeah.
Claw teaches you, you start with so much pressure. You have that side scheme and it's a crisis, so you have to deal with it quickly because the main scheme only goes up to 6. And again, everything I'd say is from a solo perspective. Just keep that in mind.
Totally fine.
And then you also, start with a minion, which could range from a weapons runner to radioactive man if you're playing with the standard setup, which is a significant challenge. So you're really taught that, like, wow, I start out under pressure. I have to get, my game going up and running. Rhino probably teaches you to pretty much just attack the villain, just rush the villain. You could almost ignore everything else and just attack Rhino. Claw teaches you that you need to manage the board.
Right.
And it's better to keep the side schemes down, the main scheme down, and the minions dead, and then attack the villain and deal with him. So I really like that. And he also teaches you about defending because it's so variable. He could literally hit you for 0 in standard or 6. Like, you really don't know. And nothing feels worse than you're like finally like, okay, fine, I'll exhaust to defend, and it's a 0. It's like, dang it. So you kind of learn the value of maybe it's okay to risk it and take a hit because it's not going to be that bad. I think newer players are very nervous about taking damage. So they're always thinking like, oh, I should exhaust to defend. I don't want to take damage. And exhausting to defend, you kind of learn as you play the game, is sort of the worst thing you can do in the game unless you're very set up for it. Like, if you're going to be rewarded for exhausting to defend, it's fine. But if you're just regular hero X, you probably don't want to be exhausting most of the time to defend because it's better to attack or thwart.
The worst is he hits you for a 1 boost, and then the one that says if you take damage, you're exhausted.
That, that's my other thing with Claw is a lot of people are being very complimentary about Claw, and I agree that he is a good villain. But I find him so annoying because he does have a lot of exhaust effects. He has a lot of stun effects. And, I think he's meant to put you under pressure. Like you said, he's a control villain. He makes it very difficult for you to do what you want to do because he has that stupid sonic boom. And I swear there's 7 of them in his deck where it makes you spend either 3 resources or exhaust all your characters. That is such a punishing encounter
Like,
card.
boom.
Yeah, I always say that too. That you don't see anything like that in Rhino. And then suddenly you're just getting pounded with all these incredibly debilitating effects. And another thing that's super great about Claw is how modular he can be because of the double boost card. So depending on what modular encounter sets you put in him, I think you can make him incredibly interesting. Again, probably more annoying because there are a lot of modular encounter sets that have very interesting boost effects. And you're going to see them when you fight Claw. So there is a lot of good things to say about him. And I think he's pretty tough. I think it's a significant step up from Rhino. Most of the time, like Rhino can definitely beat you down if you're not careful. But
yeah, he really
Claw's
shows
pretty
off
much always a challenge.
He shows off the value of mulliganing because suddenly you say, "Oh, I have Radioactive Man. I'm Spider-Man. I really want a mulligan to get a swinging web kick. Like I want to take out Radioactive Man." So you realize, what can I use right now? You're playing very tactically turn 1 against him, right? How can I get rid of that threat? How can I get rid of that minion? What do I need to do? Not can I get my Avengers Mansion out and my helicarrier and a whatever armored vest or whatever it would be. Like I'm going to get all these things out. It's like you're not doing that turn 1 against Claw. That is a recipe for disaster. So suddenly you're starting to think, oh, I have this mulligan rule. What don't I need and what do I need to look for? So that's a really nice part about him too.
Yeah, I agree. So thinking about him as a new player, he definitely is going to be an increased challenge. But I think just the way people are talking about him in chat and the way I know the community feels, I think he's still a fan favorite. I think people still go back and play Claw. I know Steve mentioned, and I've certainly seen him do it many times, that he, that's how he tests precons. Every time they come out, he throws it up against Expert Claw, and he's managed to beat, I think, Expert Claw with just about every precon.
Yeah.
So,
right.
He's beatable, but some of those, I remember some of those streams are pretty long because he can be quite a challenge.
Yeah,
and
it
then
takes some clever play.
Yes, that's exactly right. You can't just like throw yourself at Claw, or you will get overrun. And if you let the main scheme pop, you get another minion.
Yeah.
And so you really have to manage the board, which is how I love to play the game. I love to manage the board. So he always provides a lot to deal with. And then if you go up to Expert, you're starting with 2 side schemes in play, and it's just even more to deal with. So then comparing him to the other LCGs, and I guess I should have asked, I knew you had played Lord of the Rings. I wasn't sure how familiar you were with Arkham, but
I'm familiar with all of them.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think, again, all 3 of them do a fantastic job. Hello, Cards and Dice. Welcome to the stream. You've got the Journey Along the Anduin and Lord of the Rings, which is also, I believe, a fan favorite and one people go back to a lot, and a significant step up in difficulty from Passage Through Mirkwood. And similar to Claw, it starts out, it puts you under pressure. It has this massive hill troll in play, and it teaches you the value of keeping your threat low. And I promise we're going to talk about this too much if you're not familiar with these games, but it's amazing the design process. If you do look at all 3, how similar they kind of are in the types of things that they're throwing at you as a new player to teach you how to play the game properly from a strategy perspective. Like Lord of the Rings is teaching you've got to keep that threat low, or that hill troll is going to get you immediately.
The next main quest, is that the one where it's like you either stop drawing cards or you stop having the encounter phase, right? Isn't that what happens in Journey in the Anduin?
Yes, you get an extra encounter card, but the enemies don't engage you.
Right, so it's like you're going down the river, but there's all these enemies chasing you, right? So when you get to that part, so that
you really get to experience the theme of it.
Yeah, it's like switching up the mechanics of the game to get you to think differently and what do I want to do and plan for, which is kind of like Claw, because when you flip Claw from 1 to 2, that Immortal Claw, there's a lot of stuff there. 2 to 3 isn't as bad because he just gets a tough, but his stats get huge.
Yeah, so it's teaching you how to play the game properly. And then with Arkham, the second one, I'm not as plugged into the Arkham community, so I don't know how people feel, but I personally absolutely love the second scenario in the core set, the Midnight Masks. where you're going to all the different locations. You know, the first one is very sort of linear, where you just sort of, you only have a couple different
Right.
locations, but that one you really get to see the map,
At
and it
the
almost feels like you're
town?
playing. Yes.
Okay.
So it really gave me the feel of the Arkham Horror board game, which I love, the second edition. I absolutely love that game. And so, and a lot of those locations are sort of from there. And, you know, you have to travel around, you're trying to find the different cultists and unmask them. And it's very variable depending on how the cards come out, stuff like that. So I think, and again, a significant step up in difficulty. Though with Arkham, difficulty is a little bit of a nebulous
Yeah.
concept because
It's
it doesn't
always
really
there.
matter. Yeah, it's always hard, but if you lose, you don't really lose. You just move on. So that one's kind of teaches you the ticking clock nature of Arkham, where you get as much done as you can. There's a lot of scenarios like this where you
Right.
just get as much done as you can, and then you need to leave. You need it, so it
Yeah.
teaches you to resign. That resigning is an okay thing to do.
Correct. Yep.
So again, it's just fascinating the design of these and how well they do a good job. Now it's the third scenario where I think the Marvel really takes the cake here, and we'll get to Lord of the Rings and Arkham, but Ultron, absolutely fantastic third villain. I think they really learned from Lord of the Rings and Arkham on this one because the third scenario in those two boxes is just completely ridiculous. So hard.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that I ever actually played Ultron with just the core set back in the day. I think
Oh,
I was afraid. Yeah, I could because of Arkham and Lord of the Rings. If
gotcha.
I don't remember if I ever even tried them. I think I waited till I got Captain America. So I don't know if I can really speak to the difficulty of Ultron with just core set, but I've played him enough to know that he's really not that bad. He's
Mhm.
I don't even know if I think he's harder than Claw most of the time. What do you think about that?
I think he's harder than Claw.
Okay.
I mean, you definitely could get trapped or stuck on Claw early, or you could get like a bad luck hit with Claw. But I think so. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's different. I'm thinking about standard Ultron
Mhm.
versus like you need an answer to all those drones
Right. Yeah, I
and
guess
flipping
that's
up
what
and
it is.
down, and those and that second scheme is really where Ultron is tough.
Yeah.
It's that second main scheme that makes it tricky. And of course, the first one flips and gives you another drone, and it's really basically hard to prevent that first one from flipping. Of course,
Mhm.
the last one gives you a loss. So it's those schemes where he gets really tough. But I agree with you. Ultron, I think, is still my favorite fight in the game.
Oh.
Obviously, stun slows him down greatly. So that's kind of his weakness. So the fact that there's so much stun in the game that you could basically stun lock him kind of removes what Ultron's trying to do. That's his big weakness. Whereas some of the very hard villains, have steady and stalwart now. So they don't have that. But the
Mhm.
beauty of Ultron to me is the RNG, the thing that everybody complains about for Galaxy's Most Wanted, and they're totally right. In surging and random effects and just absolute chaos, Ultron does it perfectly.
Mhm.
He takes your own cards, so now you may not get your
Dweethite
shield with
mastery,
cap
what
right
yeah,
off the
whatever your
bat,
most,
right?
yeah, important cards are.
You might not. He might capture, Aunt May or whatever it is, right? So he's taking your own cards from you. He's got a lot of things that just say randomly discard cards, which is going along with that whole "I'm taking your cards." So he's not allowing you to set up, but you feel like you're okay to set up because his nothing is imminent, right? So it's
Mhm.
almost like early game. He's doing the villain talking where they're like telling their whole plot to you. Like it kind of has that feeling to it, and he's just adding these drones, and I'm going to make more drones, and I'm going to take over the world, and what are you going to do? And
Mhm.
he's slowly doing all those things. So I just think Ultron is still just so awesome because he doesn't let you play your game, but not in a totally frustrating way of I'm not doing anything, just in a oh, I bet that drone is the card I'm looking for.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one thing you mentioned is why maybe I think he's not as hard is he definitely has strategies to use against him, and if you're familiar with those, he definitely comes across as a lot easier. Like, if if you have a way to manage the drones, and you have to have a way to manage the drones, there are many different ways to do that, but you need something. You need to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're definitely going to get swarmed, and certainly it's going to happen to you the first couple times you fight him, unless you get very lucky and your first time is with Black Panther and you realize how awesome Retaliate is against Ultron. But if you're playing Captain Marvel, who doesn't have a good answer to the drones, then you can certainly be in trouble. And the other thing is keeping that main scheme at one. definitely teaches you the value of you can keep that. I know it only goes up to 3, but at least it starts at 0. So if you don't let him scheme, maybe you'll be okay. And then, yeah, if he gets to 2, he's much harder. Oh, expert Ultron, though, you mentioned, I think he is still very difficult.
Yeah.
Anytime you play him on expert, I find it to be a real challenge because when he goes to 3, he gets a whole bunch of free drones and you have to kill all of them before you can even damage him. And you just, now the nice thing is he doesn't produce the drones as easily because it's not automatic anymore, even though pretty much every encounter and boost card in there makes a drone. So you're going to be getting them, but you have to be ready to survive that initial onslaught, which is certainly a very common thing. Learning just to flip any villain, but certainly when playing an expert, flipping to stage 3 is usually you should have a plan for that.
Yeah, the fact that he changed, that's where you see he's a third villain. He changes his text on each stage. So you have to be ready for what's going to change. And like you said, whether you're playing standard or expert, you have to be ready for that next stage and know what your plan is. So you have to like plan what we're going to do, against Ultron. The other thing I'll mention with Ultron, which is kind of a total curveball here, though, is heroic mode. So it wasn't too long into the game that people were saying, some people, sorry, were saying this game is easy. We need something harder. And so the designers threw heroic mode at us. And I'll tell you something. The single best heroic 1 fight in this game is Ultron.
Yeah.
If people haven't tried it, I highly recommend. Even if you play standard heroic 1, it's fantastic because the encounter cards are just all fun. Like there's only a couple cards extra where he schemes or attacks you. So you're not getting inundated with that stuff. You're just getting more drones and more drones and more things. And you have to have lots of answers. So the heroic fight against Ultron is still one of my favorite battles in the game. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever played heroic ever, but if I do, that seems like a good place. Cause yeah, his encounter cards really aren't that bad. Usually they make a drone, which, if you're playing 4-player, that card makes a drone for everybody. So that schemes a little worse or scales a little worse. But now one thing I haven't been talking about that I wanted to, and somebody in the chat reminded me of it. Where was it? Oh, a World Quick Jester. I love how people talk about LCGs. They always mention LT and Arkham, but they never mention Game of Thrones, Star Wars, or Warhammer. Sure, totally. I mainly just comparing, or Conquest. Just comparing the co-op LCGs, I guess, because they're so similar is Legend the main reason. Yeah, there are quite a few. Where was it? Somebody mentioned the uniqueness. I think it might have been Chauncey. I take it personally when he steals my card and mills my deck. Does any other villain steal your cards? And that was definitely one thing I wanted to talk about was, are these villains still unique in any way? And I kind of forgot about that. The Collector 1 steals your cards from Galaxy's Most Wanted. And I think that is all.
The Pirate Lackeys.
Oh,
yeah. The Pirate Commanders. They steal your card and remove it from the game.
Yeah, and they have Quick Strike, which makes it very difficult to stop because they attack and damage you. Yeah, so there's a little bit of that there. And yeah, those are even worse. Rhino, is he still unique? I think Sabretooth feels like Rhino, but sort of turned up. He attacks a lot because he's trying to get to the center, but I think he's very similar. He heals, he gets tough in the way Rhino does. I think Claw is unique in that he's the only one who just automatically gets double boosts, but Green Goblin tends to get a lot of extra boost cards. Thanos, Venom.
Venom is definitely in that ballpark of getting stronger. I don't know that Venom heals. I think he just gets stronger as you hit him.
So that's that sort of general thing. One thing that's very unique about Ultron that I don't think we've seen anywhere else is if you do get to his third scheme, it becomes just a countdown. Like you can't remove threat. And I don't think we've seen that anywhere else. So I think that's really interesting that they haven't revisited that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Operation Zero Tolerance is kind of a countdown.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. There are some other alternate loss conditions. Yeah.
But it's a little more controllable, I guess. You're not forced to block or lose allies. However, I'm just trying to remember the text on all that. So
right. So then, speaking of Ultron, which we've both said very glowing things, we absolutely love playing against Ultron. I don't think you'll get that same kind of effusive praise if you talk to a Lord of the Rings player, and the escape from Dol Guldur being the third quest in that, because in solo play, which to be fair, Lord of the Rings was not designed with solo play in mind, because in 2010 the solo community was much more underground. It wasn't as well known. I think Lord of the Rings kind of made it known, like people, that's what made that game so successful, was the solo, and opened FFG's eyes up to it. But when it was designed, they weren't thinking about people playing solo one-handed with just 3 heroes, and that quest is absolutely impossible. It's not impossible,
Does
but
it
it's
take
darn
one
close.
or 2 of your heroes away?
It takes one of your heroes away, but it doesn't matter if you're playing with 1 player or 4. The whole table only loses 1 hero. So in 4-player, it's not too bad.
Oh,
That's
you only
really
lose
not
1
very
hero
debilitating.
total in 4-player?
1 hero total in standard. They did, when they
so
did the Nightmare
scales.
version, which is like a harder version they released later as a print and play. The I think it steals 2 in 3 and 4.
Okay.
So it's a little bit harder. But the other thing that makes Dol Guldur so ridiculous is there are 3 cards that start in the encounter, in the staging area, again, regardless of player count.
Yeah.
So if you're playing solo, you're down a hero, and there are 3 cards in the staging area no matter what. Just absolutely. And the variability can range from those 3 cards being not too bad to being absolutely devastating. So
yeah,
that
that's not
one,
a pleasant scenario. It's not well regarded.
It's not. And the thing is, it is good. Like if you come back to it with stronger decks, maybe play with more than 1 player. It is a fun scenario. It has some really interesting things when you move on later in the quest. There are some interesting rules, the way things change. You have to fight a Nazgul, which is cool. You're in the core set, you want to fight a Nazgul, so that's fun. But it's just, that core set really felt like you just had 1 or 2 villains. Like you didn't really have 3, because you could throw your head at Dol Guldur all day, but I don't think you're having that much fun. People mostly stayed with the first 2 passage through. But the thing,
sorry, you didn't have a full set of player cards.
Yes, that's exactly right. Back then,
I believe you had singletons, and you could have 3 in a deck, so you had to buy 3 to have enough cards.
Yeah, which I don't know if their thinking was just that with because it's mostly the more powerful cards that you only got 1 or 2 of. Like you only got 1 Unexpected Courage, which is the main reason people would buy 3 core sets. You only got 2 Test of Wills, 2 Stewards of Gondor, things like that. So,
well, they were trying to get people to play 4-player, right? So it was like buy 2 sets, and now you can play 4-player because it was made for 2. And then there's cards you only have 2 of, and then they have like really hardcore players. They didn't know the success they had on their hands either. Right? So they're trying to just sell a few more or not worry. Like, I'll say cut corners just because they needed to financially. And also, like, X-Wing wasn't out yet.
No.
So they didn't have the money that they have because X-Wing and Netrunner was the next year and put them on the charts financially. So that's just an important thing to understand there.
Yeah, I'm certainly not trying to dog it. It's just such a funny comparison going back and just how much we all hated that quest. And then with Arkham, I can't remember what it's called, but the 3rd one there is also incredibly difficult. Now, the nice thing about Arkham is, again, you can still play to the end. And and I won't spoil it, but the end is very memorable. So you don't necessarily need to win it. Corey's got to leave. Well, thank you so much for joining us. But again, it's very difficult. It's hard to proceed. And again, playing solo, which it's surprising to me how little Arkham felt designed for solo play. Just because of all the success Lord of the Rings had being, clearly the solo community came out in droves to play that game solo one-handed, because they talked about it all the time online. And Arkham still didn't quite feel made for that. Now, some people will say Marvel Champions isn't made for that, but it certainly works perfectly well solo one-handed, like 99% of the time.
It
Whereas
scales
Arkham,
the worst in solo in terms of positive or negative in Marvel Champions, right? Because it can be too easy because of stun, confuse, lock, and it can be too hard because of just advances and things like that you can't control, right?
But they also give you the most opportunities to modify things to tune that difficulty where you want it. For sure. So I guess what it comes down to is, when I say that this is the best LCG core set ever, it really boils down to Ultron. I think Ultron is the tipping point. You get a 3rd villain who definitely feels challenging and interesting, but he's fun. He's not overwhelmingly difficult. It doesn't feel like he's just there to get you to buy more cards, as people often thought about Dol Guldur and Lord of the Rings. Like, well, I guess I'll come back and play this in a year after I bought the next wave of cards. But so, yeah, I think they have just learned astoundingly well what makes a core set work. You got a full set of player cards, you get 5 fully playable heroes. I know it's a little wonky with the aspects because there was originally going to be 5 and there's 5 heroes, but it works so super duper well. So I think we really, really got blessed with the success of the first two games, and it has really culminated well into a fantastic core set that's still fun for new players to experience now, but to go back and play all three of those villains and all five of those heroes.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too for people you obviously have, I have, who played all three to see the differentials and understand how Marvel Champions kind of falls in the middle of mechanics and story. You know, there's obviously not a lot of story in Marvel Champions, but it's trying to get right to that fight, right to what you're trying to do. Lord of the Rings has a lot of story and like questing, but it is so mechanical, like
Mhm.
so mechanical,
Yes.
even more so. And then Arkham obviously really falls into the story category.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of, leads to all that. But I agree with you. The core box is amazing. I mean, when people come to the store, in fact, I just noticed the other day when I was restocking at the store I work at that we're out of the core set. And I haven't even talked to anybody word of mouth about the game recently. Because
Mhm.
sometimes I'll do a lot of sales, at our store just because I love the game so much. But people will say, "Oh, I don't know if I want to get into this. What am I going to need to buy afterward?" And I'm like, literally, this is it. How many copies of it do I need? One, right? What do I have to
Mhm.
buy after that? Do I need tokens? Do I need this? Do I need more? I was like, no, you could just search through these heroes and find, if it's you and your kid or you and your partner, like find two heroes that you like. And I highly suggest, these couple villain packs, like that's all you need to do. And you honestly don't need to get the other stuff. The core set works so well for, I'll say 50 to 100 hours of enjoyment.
Yeah, absolutely. We played the heck out of it, and I think it was a little while before the next. They dropped what Green Goblin, Captain America, and Ms. Marvel on the same day, but I
It
can't
was
remember.
Wrecking Crew before or after?
Wrecking Crew was the next thing after that.
Okay, got it. Yeah. All three of those came out. I remember cracking them all open and just
Hmm.
playing Goblin with those two heroes and whatnot. And in terms of the villains, I agree. Rhino's just kind of there. He's playable. You can make him fun with modulars, but I wouldn't rank him very high.
Hmm.
Claw's amazing. Like I said, he's the best. I think he's the best one to test against because of that control that we were talking about. So I agree with Steve and with you on
Hmm.
that. He's still, I'd put him in the top 10 villains for me, and Ultron's still my number one. He's still a top 5 villain to me. So I mean, we've got
Hmm.
some of the best scenarios right there in the core set, which is awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the other nice thing about Ultron I wanted to mention is he and some other villains do this too, but Ultron especially really facilitates very specific scenarios. Like if you're playing Thor or Valkyrie or Rocket, you're going to have fun if you pull out Ultron. So it's just nice to have that scenario in the game that guarantees a lot of tiny minions that are going to
Mhm.
be easy to murder with your various things. So just a lot of variety. Yeah, you've got the control and claw. Rhino teaches you, don't get run over and don't let the main scheme pop, I guess. But claw, yeah, teaches you about surviving control and keeping the board clear. And then Ultron just is going to swarm you if you're not careful. So just really quickly, I want to go into the chat now. If anybody has any this or that's they'd like to throw at us, because I think that pretty much wraps up our core set talk. We talked about the heroes and the villains, and we love them. We think they're great. And everything is fun there. I know I saw something. Steve is lobbying for basic to become an aspect.
Yeah, so put this or that's in the chat. They can be Marvel Champions related. They can be LCG related. They can be competitive LCG related, ID Jester. They can just be silly things about life, this or that. Anything. It's kind of like a lightning round. You can line those up for us and do my job for me.
Actually, I've
Hashtag
got
Branch job.
I've got one that I know Jester mentioned earlier, and it's something he and I have talked a lot about. So I'll do one for Jester. Mulligan, trap or not?
It's not a trap, but you walked me into that.
Yeah. I mean, I totally see what he's saying, and I like the way he handles it when he plays. He just, he doesn't like his hand to reshuffles. I'll be honest, I do that sometimes too. If I'm playing alone and I just get this ridiculous hand that has all my best cards, I'm like, those 6 cards just happen to fall off the top of my deck, and I'm gonna reshuffle. But overall, I do like the mulligan rules. He and I have talked a lot about that. Mark Brook says, Kang or Mojo?
You can
That's
click on
right.
them.
That's right. Sorry, this is
That's
brand new to
okay.
me.
I'm helping you out.
Yes, thank you.
Boy, I really like both those, but I think I'm still a huge Kang fan, especially multiplayer.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Mojo. I really like the theme of it is so much fun. And Kang, I played Kang 4-player for the first time ever at Con of Heroes
Oh,
this
nice.
couple weeks ago, and it was really fun. It was just really long. And the thing that I thought was really funny about it is I've often heard people say, like, oh, Kang's not worth it solo. He's really so interesting 4-player. And I think I realized playing him in 4-player, the reason people think that is because they don't play solo. So when they
Sure,
get
yeah.
in their own little bubble, they're like, "Oh, this is
Yeah,
so
yeah.
cool. I'm doing my own thing." And I'm like, "Well, this is me every time I'm playing the game. This
No,
just
he's
makes
fine
it
because he gives you
longer."
4 different paths in
Yeah,
solo.
no, yeah, exactly. So that's what I think he's still fun to play in solo. So, but yeah, if I had to choose there, definitely I love the Mojo stuff. He's so cool. Let's see, Stan Lee or Steve Ditko? Oh, going old school. I'm not even sure
I
how
was
to
thinking
answer
Mike
that.
Ditka, so I was like, Ditka.
Now I'm gonna kind of give away a little bit of my lack of knowledge here. Ditko was the artist, right? Stan Lee was the writer. Is that how it worked, or was Ditko also a writer? Do you know? Maybe
I do
someone can
not
help
know.
us
I'm
out.
not a comics person.
I'm
I
I'm
know
not as
both
much of a
names for
classics.
sure. Stan
Yes,
Lee,
me as
obviously, a
well.
lot more with the MCU.
Yeah,
So I
I'm
will say
sad I don't
Stan
have a
Lee.
better opinion. Yeah, and I'll go with Ditko just to take the other. ID Jester, this or click. Okay. Fix the broken heroes or release new heroes. Always an interesting discussion.
I'm 100% on release new heroes. We have so many heroes. If I don't like one, I just keep moving on.
Yeah, I like the idea of going back and looking at, like, I'd love to see another take. We kind of do we talked about this in one of the earlier episodes, second takes, like Venom is sort of a second take on Spider-Man. He has some similar abilities and things like that. So they kind of go that route where they'll do an older hero again as a new hero. And then of course they make, new player cards that can then be used to go back and make older heroes better. But that doesn't fix the fact that She-Hulk's kit could be a little bit better and things like that, the cards that you're stuck with. So I
But
like
every card's a resource. So if a card's no good, you just like
that's
it.
true.
It's so easy to just move on. I think a big part of it too is there are 2 designers working on this game, Caleb and Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had a team of 12, I would certainly say, can't you take 2 or 3 people and have them go and design some cards going back? You know what I mean? And give us some other things that we could do.
Right.
But overall, I think just keep releasing new heroes. I think house ruling is way more valid than people give it credit. Like, just slap that web warrior on Spider-Man and go. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, because if they come out and say play how you want, then people don't feel validated in
Right.
like they care about you and your play style. So like I can't add Web Warrior, but then we want them to actually go print a card, but that's going to take resources. Like, how are they going to get that card out to everybody?
Sure.
So the community can do those kind of things. So I'd rather they just work for it. Although I would love to see the Shield Agent promo card that can replace your signature ally. The one that's
Oh,
just
yeah.
a
That's a
3
cool idea.
health, 2 cost, 1/1, and it can the text just says this may replace your signature ally. I
Mm-hmm.
love that people put the team up card in place when they play multiplayer. I just
Yep.
think that
Yep.
stuff
I've
is
done that.
great. Make it more fun for yourself. Don't make it frustrating. You're there to have a good time.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm definitely among those people that I really struggle with house ruling things. It's just the way my
Yeah.
brain works. I want to play the game the way it was designed. And I do, and I guess another thing I have a slightly different take on is, yes, you can use those terrible cards as resources, but I want the hero cards to be awesome. And it's always disappointing to me when they're not awesome. So I would like to see, I don't know, I'm all for new cards, new heroes, but somehow you're right. They don't have the resources to do it. If this was FFG 15 years ago, maybe they could like release like a revised core set with a cool She-Hulk and a cool Spider-Man and all that. Not that they're bad, but anyway, but we know that's not going to happen. So Steve says miniatures or cards. I'm definitely a cards guy.
I am a super cards guy. I can't
Yeah.
wait to jump into Lorcana and to Star Wars Unlimited when it comes out. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely there. Although, funny enough, I have a miniatures game set up in front of me right now. So
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it shows up on here.
Oh, what's that?
So there you go. This is Massive Darkness 2.
Oh,
So yeah,
very cool.
there's some miniatures, and sorry, real fast, there's gigantic miniatures. Don't know where
Whoa,
that is.
neat.
So Anyway, but I'm definitely a card gamer through and through.
Yeah, I'm very much a card gamer. I mean, I love miniatures. I don't want to talk about how much money I've spent on Marvel United, but
Oh,
whatever
right.
the all in on 3 seasons is how much I've spent. And I love, love, love the minis for that. But forced to choose, I love card games. 80s movies or new movies?
I'm pretty sure I'm 80s movies here.
Yeah, I figured you would be. I don't have the nostalgia for 80s movies like a lot of people my age certainly should. I certainly enjoy many of them, but I'm such a fan. Mostly it's just the MCU. I just love the MCU so much. I
Do you
wouldn't
have
want to give that
siblings?
up. Do I have what?
Siblings.
Yeah, a couple younger siblings, a few.
They're younger than you. See, all my siblings are older than me.
Yeah.
So that makes me older than I am, right? Because I'm living a little bit through my brother and
Okay.
sister who are older
Okay.
than me. I imagine that doesn't make you younger, but you don't have the older people who are influencing you, during that
That's
time.
true.
So
Yeah, watching all their
the
stuff and
80s
whatnot.
movies on, yeah.
Hmm. Let's see. Just quickly, you're going to click on all these. Kang, Hela, and Mojo are Eric Furston's favorites. What is your favorite villain and hero fight from the core set? Like the comparison, I do love Black Panther against Ultron because it is fun getting that retaliate and just solving your drone problem.
I don't know if it's the best fight from the box, but by far my favorite two are Ultron and Captain Marvel.
Okay.
So those are my two favorite. I don't know that Captain Marvel is particularly good against Ultron, but those are my two.
Yeah, I think yeah, I would say Black Panther Ultron just because I like Black Panther to have a lot of like targets and just a lot of different things to do, and I think Ultron provides that. Though Claw is good for that too. Ooh, SNES or Genesis? I've always been a Nintendo guy.
Yeah, same. SNES.
Mark Hamill or Heath Ledger Joker? That's a good
Oof.
one.
Wow.
Oh, I mean, I'm gonna go Mark Hamill because there's just such
Man.
a body of work there, and it's so spectacular. But Heath Ledger sure did nail it in his one go.
Sure, I'll go Heath Ledger.
Okay, this is fun. Die Hard 1 or Die Hard 2? I think the very underrated Die Hard 2. I enjoy that one very much.
Yippee-ki-yay, it's number one for me.
Yeah.
I'm getting the calendar, where he falls off the tower.
Early in the chat, someone asked about your thoughts on the Angel reveal. Oh, I apologize. I missed that. Super not good at keeping up with chat. I am going to, for me, I will certainly let Brant talk. I didn't get to do an Angel preview just because I had a crazy couple weeks, but I'm going to do one this weekend. But I would say early on, I'm actually glad I didn't do one right away because I was pretty underwhelmed. I'll be honest. He didn't really. This is one of the first times a hero reveal, and I was just kind of like, meh. But it's really grown on me the more I thought about it. So I'm gonna have a lot of fun talking about that. What do you think, Brant?
I'll bring on the aerial. I mean, that's so fun to get that trait that we've kind of seen. It's definitely not been in the background. It's definitely been in the foreground. We've had a lot of use of aerial, but that's going to be super fun. And man, I just keep saying it, but the fold card, but folding out this way
That's
with
cool.
the panoramic art is just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, he looks great. ID Jester, Call of Cthulhu card game or Warhammer Invasion? I haven't played either game, but I like the Arkham theme better. So I'd go Call of Cthulhu.
Oh, Warhammer Invasion is fantastic. So I played that outside. It's right there, in fact.
Gorismo is letting us know Stan Lee was the writer. Yeah, and I think Ditko did the art. Man, I love that 60s art style. So I think I was the one that said Ditko. And now that I know who's who, I would definitely go with that because I mean, Stanley's so great for creating all those characters, but that 60s dialogue is hilarious and so wordy. So very, very wordy. Star Wars prequels or sequels, hashtag original trilogy forever. I'm going to let you go first.
I like the prequels better than the sequels.
Okay, I have some unpopular opinions about the sequels and that I actually really enjoy them. Every time I walk out of a theater and I'm like, oh, that was fun. I really liked that. And I go online and completely have my hopes and dreams destroyed.
Yeah, don't go online.
Because everybody's like, well, that was the worst movie I've ever seen.
No. The people who hate Star Wars the most are Star Wars fans.
100%. So yeah, I loved the prequels and then hated the prequels and have grown to appreciate them because they've done such a good job. And I think they can do this with the sequels too, of making the prequels better retroactively with things like the Clone Wars TV show, with things like even The Mandalorian, and like Obi-Wan, like all the new stuff, making the prequel stuff feel like it mattered and it's still relevant has gone a long way towards improving my opinion of them. The movies themselves, just the acting and the story like they chose to tell. I don't think we needed a 9-year-old Darth Vader and all that stuff, but I do really like them. But I know I don't hate the sequels. I think they were fun. I recognize the problems. I know what's wrong with them, but I like them anyway. Dive Bomb or Ever Vigilant?
I mean, Ever Vigilant to me is just the better consistent. I'm going to hedge.
This one's easy
Ever
for me.
Vigilant, I think is the card I like better. I feel like I can build a deck based around that. Dive Bomb feels like it's the epic moment, and I mean, but Rocket Dive Bomb is ludicrous. With all the card draw in a 4-player game, it's unbelievable.
Right. For me, it's Ever Vigilant because I think damage is boring. Play to win or play for fun? I play for fun.
Fun.
Yeah. Chess or checkers? Not a fan of either, but probably chess just because there's more going on.
Chess.
All right. There's only a few more here. Shield Captain Marvel is one of my permanent decks. Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon? I was always a Pokemon guy.
All right. So Larry at the store has me trying to play Yu-Gi-Oh. That game.
We're just going to do a few more of these, by the way.
Is so awkward. I don't really understand it. So
Which
I played
one?
Pokemon with Yu-Gi-Oh. I've been playing that recently. Larry, who's used to be on the channel, he's been trying to get me to play Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm not into it at all. So Pokemon collecting with my kids is really fun.
Marvel Champions, Lord of the Rings, or Arkham. I'm definitely a Marvel Champions guy, though I've loved all three. Lucas or Filoni and Favreau? Filoni and Favreau. Absolutely killing it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, love all the new Disney.
I do like stuff. The other two too. I love the stuff they're doing.
Yeah, they're just killing
Filoni it. Kind of gets his own category. I understand that Favreau's done really well lately, but Dave Filoni's been doing a lot for a long time, and all this structure and style we're seeing. I mean, even bringing back some of the characters has been thanks to Dave. So I would definitely, as much as I appreciate Jon Favreau, like he's definitely the added late.
Mm-hmm. Carlos was super late, was playing Ironheart versus Red Skull. Well, that's awesome. So I missed a notification.
Ironheart.
Sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you're able to make it and you can go back and watch from the beginning. Really pushing through. We're going to wrap up with just the ones that are here. As far as potential new heroes, Daredevil or Moon Knight. Come on, it's got to be Daredevil.
I think I want to see Daredevil just so people stop complaining.
Moon Knight would probably be more interesting hero, though.
Probably true.
DC or Marvel? I super duper love them both, but the MCU has pushed me over as a Marvel fan. If the DC get their movies together, I could come back around, though, because I like the characters better. Stuff or things? I'm a fan of stuff.
Stuff.
And the very last one we will do, opera or disco? Opera. If the caveat that it's like also includes like musicals and stuff. Not a disco guy.
Yeah, I think I'd go opera too.
Fair enough.
That's a great question, ID Jester. I love that.
Yes.
That was a question you asked.
Yeah, quite a range of opinion there for sure. So I think that is going to do it. Thank you so very much, everybody, for joining us. That was a lot of fun. I don't know that we will do this live regularly, but it was fun to do that and to make sure we could get one out today. And so I think
that's it. We're done talking. I could go for hours more.
Well, I mean, we went for an hour, so broke the format by quite a bit. But appreciate all the kind words in the chat. And I think the only thing left to say is have a good week, Brant.
Have a good week, Josh.
And have a good week, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.